That evening, a fine drizzle misted the entrance of County General Hospital. I stood behind a plastic table with a few other volunteers, handing out meals to the city's poor. But then, a figure in the line of people waiting for food made the bitter resentment I had buried for nearly 3 years surge to the surface. The woman wore a brown coat, its shoulders faded, a simple hat on her head, her hands clutching an old tote bag. She stood at the end of the line, and though she was much thinner and her hair was streaked with gray, I recognized her instantly. It was Laura, my ex-wife. My name is Henry Miller, but most people call me Hank. That year I was 49, the owner of Hometown Essentials. Nearly 3 years ago, Laura and I had ended our 8-year marriage with a notarized document. The day we walked out of the courthouse, I saw Marcus Thorne, the owner of a much larger corporation than mine, pull up in a luxury car to pick her up. From that day on, I believed Laura had chosen a wealthier man. I didn't ask, nor did I need an explanation. Men can be strange sometimes. We say we don't care, but inside, we're nursing an ego bigger than a 10-quart pressure cooker. Laura moved toward the serving table, and when it was her turn, she said softly, "Could I please have 2 meals? And for one, could I get something soft, nothing spicy?" The young volunteer was about to nod when I stepped forward. Seeing Laura's worn-out coat and thin hands, a very ugly sense of satisfaction washed over me. I made sure to speak loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Did the rich guy dump you? You looked so smug getting into that fancy car. Now you have to line up for a free meal?" The atmosphere around the table grew tense. Laura froze, placing the container she had just received to one side as hot soup spilled onto her wrist. She winced, but didn't let go. Her eyes reddened for a moment, but she didn't argue. She just clutched the 2 containers to her chest. "Could I have an extra plastic spoon, please?" Her voice was so calm it was infuriating. A white-haired old man standing nearby leaned on his cane and looked at me. When a marriage ends, there should at least be some human decency left. She's already humbling herself to ask for a meal. You don't need to push her down further. I forced a laugh. "Sir, you don't know our story," the old man replied. "I only know that words can be knives. Once you stab someone, the scar remains." A flush of anger crept up my neck, but I maintained a cold demeanor. Laura took the 2 meals and walked past me without a backward glance. I intended to ignore her, but as I watched her go, I noticed she was in a hurry, her left foot dragging slightly. The tote bag on her shoulder was bulging with a few water bottles and a package of medical gauze. She held the 2 meal containers carefully, as if afraid that tilting them even slightly would deprive the waiting person of their dinner. Laura had always been a light eater, so why did she ask for 2 portions, specifically requesting one with soft, non-spicy food? I turned to my friend. "Mike, can you cover for me for a bit?" He glanced in Laura's direction. "Hank, don't go starting trouble. Doing charity work with a mouth that sharp will chase away any good karma." Normally, I would have argued, but at that moment, I didn't have the energy. I pulled off my gloves and followed Laura, keeping my distance. She walked 2 blocks, then looped back toward the old market district by the river. At a small pharmacy, she placed the 2 meal containers on a chair and pulled a handful of crumpled bills from her pocket. "Can you just give me 2 days' worth of this prescription?" she asked, handing over a wrinkled piece of paper. The pharmacist looked at the prescription. "Why not get the whole week's supply?" Laura counted her money, her voice tinged with embarrassment. "I still need to buy an egg. I'll come back tomorrow when I have more money." The pharmacist sighed, filled the prescription, and discreetly added 2 extra packets of gauze without charging her. Laura thanked her profusely before leaving. I stood under the awning across the street, a knot forming in my stomach. If Laura was living with Marcus Thorne as I had thought, she wouldn't be counting every dollar for medication. Or was it as I had jeered had she been abandoned? The thought should have brought me more satisfaction, but watching her count her change, my earlier words felt like a heavy stone in my chest. Laura bought a single egg and then turned into a narrow alley behind the market. On either side were low-income apartment buildings with rusting corrugated roofs. She walked to the very last unit, took out a key, and opened the door. I hid behind a corner wall. The door didn't close completely, propped open by a plastic chair. Through the gap, I saw Laura place the 2 meal containers on a table, wash her hands, and then walk over to a bed pushed against the wall. "I'm back. Are you tired, Mom?" I thought I had misheard. Laura bent down and helped a frail woman sit up. She propped a pillow behind her back, wiped the corner of her mouth, and then opened a container, mashing the meat with the soup to make it softer. The woman's hair was disheveled, her face gaunt, and the left side of her body was almost completely still. There was a faint bruise on her wrist, and her leg, visible from under the thin blanket, was dry and pale. I looked again, and a chill ran down my spine. It was my mother, Susan Miller. For months, my brother Leo had told me that Mom was receiving treatment at a top-tier rehabilitation center in the city. Every month, I transferred him $4,500 to cover her medical bills, a private room, and a caregiver. His wife, Hannah, even sent me regular videos of Mom in a clean room, a blood pressure monitor by her bedside. So why was my mother here? I don't remember how I got through the door, only that when Laura turned around, the spoon in her hand clattered to the floor. "Hank?" I didn't answer. I walked to the bedside. My mother's mouth was twisted to one side, her eyes wide, tears streaming down her face as she recognized me. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Susan tried to lift her right arm, her trembling hand reaching for my wrist, clutching it as if she was afraid I would disappear. She opened her mouth several times, but only broken sounds came out. Laura quickly supported her. "Mom, speak slowly. Hank is here now." She looked at me, tears soaking into her hair. It took a long time for her to form a few distorted words. "Hank, don't. Trust. Leo." I stood frozen. Outside, the rain began to fall harder on the metal roof. The 2 charity meals sat open on the table. One was for the mother I thought was being well cared for. The other was for the ex-wife I had just publicly humiliated. That day, I was handing out food to strangers to feel like a decent person. But I didn't know that my own mother was waiting for a spoonful of soft food in a room at the end of an alley. And the person I had despised for nearly 3 years was the one sitting by her bedside. My mother's hand suddenly slipped from my wrist. Her breathing became ragged, her chest heaving as if she had just run a marathon. Laura immediately pulled the pillow lower, turned her head to the side, and placed a hand on her forehead. "Don't ask any more questions. Call an ambulance right now." I was still standing motionless in the cramped room. "You have to tell me what happened." Laura spun around, her expression no longer the resigned look I had seen at the hospital entrance. "Your mother is struggling to breathe. Does right or wrong matter right now? Save her first." Her words were like a bucket of cold water to my face. I called for an ambulance and, with Laura's help, moved my mother into the old wheelchair by the bed. As I bent down, I saw her legs clearly. The left one was almost immobile, her ankle swollen. There was a healing scratch on her shin. Besides the faint bruise on her right wrist, there were 2 distinct red marks, as if someone had gripped her too tightly. I gritted my teeth. Who did this to her? Laura, adjusting the scarf around my mother, replied, "I don't know everything. If you want answers, you need to let the doctors examine her first." On the way to the hospital, my mother leaned on Laura's shoulder. I sat across from them, holding the bag of medication she had brought. Inside were a few half-used blister packs, 2 unlabeled plastic bottles, and a white powder in a baggie tied with a rubber band. I pulled up the photos of the prescriptions Hannah used to send me. The names of the drugs in the photos didn't match most of what was in the bag. "Where did these come from?" Laura shook her head. "When I picked your mother up, these bottles were already in her bag. I didn't dare give them to her. I only used the new prescription from the county hospital. Why didn't you throw them away?" "Because I thought one day they might need to be tested." Her voice was steady, but each word sent a chill down my spine. I called Leo right from the ambulance. It rang 4 times before he picked up. "What's up, Hank?" I tried to stay calm. "Leo, where's Mom?" There was a brief silence on the other end. "She's at the rehab center." "Hannah's been sending you videos, right?" "I just found her in a rented room behind the market." Leo took a sharp breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was rushed. "Are you with Laura? Answer me first. Why is Mom with her?" Leo spoke in a torrent, as if the story had been rehearsed. "After her stroke, Mom's been really confused. Sometimes she calls me Dad. Other times she insists on going back to the old house. We took her to the county hospital for observation. Laura found out, claimed to be family, and took Mom while I was home getting her clothes. We've been looking for her for months." I glanced at Laura, She was wiping the sweat from my mother's forehead, not even looking at me. "You've been looking for months and you didn't tell me?" "I was afraid you'd get angry. Besides, we were gathering paperwork to file a report." Don't just listen to her side, Hank. She resents our family. She might be using Mom to get back at us. Just then, my phone buzzed. Hannah sent a photo through a messaging app. It was a document with a red thumbprint and the official-looking stamp of the Serenity Springs Rehabilitation Center at the bottom. It stated, "Susan Miller voluntarily grants her son, Leo Miller, the right to decide her place of treatment and manage all funds related to her care." Hannah added a message. "Look at this, Hank. Mom gave us the responsibility. Laura taking her was against the family's wishes." The document made my head spin. It was true that Mom had difficulty speaking, and her memory was fragmented. And Laura had hidden her in a rented room without my knowledge. Everything in front of me was a tangled mess. I hung up and looked straight at Laura. "You took my mother from the hospital without telling anyone?" Laura looked up, the exhaustion on her face slowly turning to bitterness. "What did Leo just tell you? That I claimed to be family and just took her? And you believe him?" "I'm asking for clarification." Laura laughed, but it was a dry, hollow sound. "Nearly 3 years ago, you said the exact same thing. Your family showed you a photo and an envelope of cash, and you immediately turned me into the villain. Now they show you another piece of paper, and you're looking at me with that same expression." I was about to argue, but the ambulance had just pulled up to the emergency room. Laura said nothing more. She opened the door, called for the paramedics, and helped them get my mother inside. Dr. Evans examined her for a long time. She asked detailed questions about the timeline of the stroke, her diet, the medications she was on, and her physical therapy schedule. Laura was able to answer most of the questions. I, the eldest son who had been dutifully sending money, could only stand by. After the examination, the doctor asked Laura and me to step into the hallway. The partial paralysis isn't unusual for a post-stroke patient, but her recovery has been interrupted for quite some time. Her blood pressure is not well controlled, and her body shows signs of malnutrition and lack of mobility. I asked, "Was my mother being starved, doctor?" Dr. Evans shook her head. "We can't say that for sure. Patients with difficulty swallowing can lose weight easily, even if they are being fed. We'll need to run more tests and monitor her." She looked at the bruise on my mother's arm and requested a photo for the record. Impatiently, I asked if she thought my mother had been abused. The bruise could be from a fall, an IV insertion, or from being held. We shouldn't jump to conclusions without evidence. By evening, the initial toxicology screen came back. It showed a sedative in my mother's system that was not on her prescription list. I felt the blood rush to my head. "Who gave that to her?" The doctor answered directly. "We can only confirm the presence of an unprescribed medication. We can't determine who administered it, the dosage, or for what purpose. You absolutely cannot draw your own conclusions." Laura took the 2 unlabeled plastic bottles from her bag and, following the doctor's instructions, placed them in a separate evidence bag. I kept these from when I picked her up. I asked the doctor to see if they're related. I turned to her. "You knew the medication was suspicious and you still didn't tell me?" Laura looked at me for a long time, then pulled an old, battered phone from her tote bag. The screen was a web of cracks, one corner held together with clear tape. I called. I texted. I even went to your house. She opened the call log but didn't hand it to me right away. "But the thing is, Hank, some doors won't open, no matter how much you knock." I looked at the phone in her hand, and, for the first time, understood that the period when my mother was missing was not a blank slate as I had imagined. Someone had been trying to reach me, and someone else had been standing in the way, blocking every cry for help. I reached for the phone, but Laura held on, as if to make sure that this time I would look at everything and not just glance and pass judgment. The screen was so cracked that I had to tilt it to read properly. In the call log, my number appeared repeatedly in late May. One day, Laura had called 3 times in the morning and twice in the evening. All the calls were only a few seconds long. I frowned. My phone never rang. Laura opened my contact information. Under my name, Hank, was a small line, blocked. I checked my own phone. Laura's number was still in the blocked list, where it had been for nearly 3 years. An old memory surfaced. After the divorce, Hannah had taken my phone, tapping the screen. Why are you even keeping her number? She's with a rich guy now. She'll just come back and bother you for money. I was angry at the time and had just replied, do whatever you want. I never imagined that dismissive nod would become a locked door at the exact moment my mother needed to be saved. I put my phone down. You could have called the company. I did, Laura said, opening a notes app. It listed dates, times, and the person who answered. The first 4 calls were all picked up by Hannah. The first time, Hannah said I was out of town visiting distributors. The second time, she said I didn't want to talk to my ex-wife. The third time, as soon as Laura mentioned my mother, the line went dead. The fourth time, Hannah said bluntly, don't use his mother as an excuse. This family has nothing to do with you anymore. I looked at Laura. How are you so sure it was Hannah? After living in the same house with my sister-in-law for over a decade, I know her voice. Laura opened her messaging app. The company's account still had the message she had sent, with a photo of my mother in the county hospital. She is very weak, has run out of medication, and there's no family member here to complete the paperwork. Please inform Hank or Leo to come as soon as possible. The reply from the other side, don't use a sick person to try and get back into this family. We don't need you involved. The company account was logged in on the computer in the administration office. I had access, but I was often traveling for work and rarely checked it. Both Leo and Hannah knew the password. Did you not text Leo's personal number? Laura looked at me. Leo was the one who left her at the hospital. Why would I text him? I was speechless. Doctor, Evans walked by and reminded us that my mother needed to rest. Laura went in to adjust the blanket for her, then came back out into the hallway. The red mark from the hot soup was still visible on her wrist. I asked quietly, you said you even went to the house? Yes. 3 days after I brought your mother to the apartment, I took a bus to the old house. The gate was locked, the curtains drawn. A neighbor said Leo and Hannah had taken your mother to the city for treatment, and that you were busy opening a new distribution center and rarely came home. I stood outside for almost an hour, knocking, but no one answered. Later, Hannah texted me that if I came again, she would report me for harassing her ex-husband's family. So why didn't you find me at the office? I went. The security guard said you were out. The receptionist said she was instructed not to accept any documents from me. Laura took out a small, worn envelope. It had a post office stamp and the words "Return to Sender" printed on it. Inside was a copy of my mother's hospital admission form, the prescription, and a note urging me to contact her immediately. Why was this letter returned? The mailman said the company refused to accept it. I remembered the receptionist, a young woman named Vanessa, once hinting that Hannah often went through my mail. I had dismissed it as office gossip between women who didn't get along. So many signs had passed right in front of me and I had ignored them all. Not because they were well hidden, but because I was accustomed to believing that family would never harm their own. I clenched the envelope. You could have called the police. Laura was silent for a moment, then replied, report what? The hospital confirmed that your mother was lucid and voluntarily left with me. I had no proof that she was being mistreated, who was giving her the sedatives, or why Leo had abandoned her. If I had gone to the police with just my suspicions, the first person to accuse me of making things up would have been you. I couldn't deny it. At that moment, your mother needed a bed, her blood pressure medication, and someone to help her to the bathroom. I chose to focus on the immediate needs. I thought if I could just find you, everything would be clear. I looked down at Laura's worn-out plastic sandals. Where did you get the money to take care of her for all these months? I had some savings. I also sold the 3 small gold bars my mother gave me for our wedding. At night, I did bookkeeping remotely for 2 construction supply stores. During the day, I took your mother to physical therapy. You still had those gold bars? What's the point of holding on to gold when the person in front of you can't afford medicine? I remembered those gold bars. On our wedding day, my own mother had to sell an old pair of earrings to buy them for Laura. For 18 years of our marriage, even when the company was short on cash, Laura never touched them. Yet she sold them to care for the woman who had once kicked her out of the house. I asked, this afternoon, were you really so broke that you had to ask for a free meal? This morning, I paid for her physical therapy session. This afternoon, I bought 2 days' worth of medication. I had 3,2 left in my wallet. I was going to buy some oatmeal, but then I saw the hospital was giving out free meals, so I asked for 2. One for your mother, and one for me. She looked me straight in the eye. I asked for a meal, Hank, not for your pity. My face burned. The old saying goes, even in poverty, maintain your integrity. Laura could accept a free meal, but she never once used my mother to ask for a single dollar. In the hospital room, Susan stirred. Laura immediately went in to adjust her position. She did everything with practiced ease, from fluffing the pillows and supporting her legs to checking the urinary drainage bag. And I stood at the door, for the first time feeling like a visitor. I had transferred money regularly, asked about her through a few video clips, and considered my filial duties fulfilled. Meanwhile, the woman who no longer had any obligation to my family had sold her wedding keepsake, worked through the night, and helped my mother through every moment of pain. I took out my phone and called my assistant. Cancel my entire schedule for tomorrow. Have the car ready. I'm going to the county hospital, and then to the Serenity Springs Center. Laura came back out. What are you going to do? I'm going to verify every word Leo said, every document Hannah sent, and every dollar I transferred. She didn't look pleased. You're seeking the truth for your mother's sake, not to prove me right. I nodded. You're right, and this time, I'll see and hear for myself. I won't let anyone else tell me the story. Laura went back inside to stir a glass of warm water for my mother. I looked at the returned envelope and understood that for the past few months, the cries for help hadn't disappeared. They had reached the right address. It was just that there were too many people around me who wanted to block them, and I was too arrogant to realize that my own door had been locked by someone else from the inside. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital very early. The hallways still smelled of disinfectant, and a few family members of patients were huddled over cold cups of coffee. Laura had been up almost all night. She was leaning back in a chair, dark circles under her eyes, but the moment she saw my mother stir, she was on her feet, adjusting the blanket. I said, I'm going to the county hospital today. Can you come with me? Laura glanced into the room. I've asked Mrs. Gable from next door to look in on Mom for a bit. But you have to promise me one thing. What is it? When you get there, listen to the whole story. Don't fly off the handle after hearing half a sentence and scare people off. I nodded. 3 years ago, I had listened to half a sentence and then written the rest of the story myself with my own suspicions. The price for that was an 8-year marriage. The county hospital was about 40 miles from the city. On the way, Laura barely spoke. The silence between us was both strange and heavy. When we arrived, we found the social services office. After checking the records, a social worker named Maria confirmed that my mother had been admitted to the emergency room at the end of May. The person who initially handled the paperwork was Leo Miller. I asked, do the records show who discharged her? Maria flipped through the pages. Mr. Miller said he was going home to get his mother's ID, clothes, and old medications, but he never came back. Did the hospital try to call him? Many times. At first, the phone rang, but no one answered. Later, it went straight to voicemail. Laura sat beside me, her hands resting on her knees. She didn't interject, nor did she look at me as if to say, see? Her silence made me feel even more ashamed of myself. Maria continued. The patient needed care because she had difficulty walking and speaking. We checked her old records and found Miss Johnson's number, which had been saved from when the patient had gallbladder surgery, so we tried calling it. I turned to Laura. You came right away? I got here about an hour later. Maria nodded. She arrived around 10 p.m., bringing soup and clothes, but she didn't demand to take the patient home immediately. Miss Johnson insisted that we continue trying to contact the 2 biological sons. I asked, so why did the hospital eventually let my mother leave with her? A nurse walked in from outside. She recognized Laura immediately. You're the one who was looking after Mrs. Miller, right? Laura stood up. Yes. Hello, Sarah. The nurse Sarah pulled up a chair. I remember this case because the old lady was clinging to her son's hand. He said he was just going home to get some things, but when he pulled his hand away, it was a bit forceful. The old lady called out after him. Her words were unclear, but I could make out the word don't. I showed her a photo of Leo on my phone. Are you sure this is the person? Yes. He was wearing a blue shirt and brown leather sandals. Before he left, he said the family would be right back. And did he ever come back? No. The word was soft, but it landed in my heart like a stone. For months, every time I asked, Leo would complain about how busy he was taking care of Mom, how he was losing sleep. One time, he even texted, "You just focus on the company, Hank. I've got Mom." I believed him. I even felt sorry for him and transferred extra money for nutritional supplements. I asked if there was security footage from that day. Maria replied, "There are cameras in the hallway, but the hospital can't release footage to family members without a formal request. If law enforcement asks, we will cooperate." The relevant data has been flagged for preservation after Miss Johnson reported the situation. Her answer brought me back to reality. I was here to verify, not to grab a video and act on impulse. Maria handed me a copy of a signed confirmation. When she was lucid, Mrs. Miller correctly identified Miss Johnson, remembered her old address, and the names of her 2 sons. She repeatedly said she wanted to go with Miss Johnson and did not want to be left alone. The doctor on duty assessed that she was capable of expressing her wishes at that time. Miss Johnson only signed as a temporary caregiver. Nowhere does it state that she is the legal guardian, has power of attorney, or the right to make decisions on your mother's behalf. I read every word, then asked, "What about the document saying my mother granted full power to Leo?" Maria shook her head. "We have no such document in our records here. If it was issued by another facility, you'll have to verify it at the place named on the document." Nurse Sarah hesitated. "There's something else I think you should know. The night Miss Johnson arrived, the old lady had a slight fever. She sat by her bed, sponging her down and feeding her soup, spoonful by spoonful, until almost morning. I asked why her husband didn't come. She said they were divorced." I lowered my head. Sarah sighed. "She's not even his daughter-in-law anymore, but she stayed. The biological son says he's going to get some things and then vanishes. Every family has its own story. I'm not here to judge. But what the records say, we report exactly that." Laura said her thanks, and we walked out to the hospital courtyard. The sun was high, and the crepe myrtle trees stood silent. I asked, "What did Mom say to you that day?" She recognized me, grabbed my shirt, and kept begging me not to leave her. I told her I would wait for Leo to come back, but after a whole night, no one showed up. Did you think he might have gotten into an accident on the way? At first, yes. I even asked the hospital to call him again. It was only when his phone went straight to voicemail that I understood. It wasn't that he couldn't make it back. It was that he never intended to. The old saying, "Blood is thicker than water," echoed in my head. For years, I believed that my own blood would never betray me. But here, in this place, the person who shared my mother's blood had pulled his hand away and walked out. And the person my family had cut all ties with had taken a bus in the middle of the night to sit by her bedside. I called Leo. He didn't answer. The second time, the line was busy. The third time, he turned off his phone. I didn't call again, nor did I send any threatening messages. I took a photo of the case number and the names of the staff we had spoken to, and requested that the hospital preserve all documents according to regulations. Laura looked at me. "Aren't you going to go straight to Leo's house?" "I want to. So badly." "Then why don't you?" I looked at the confirmation paper in my hand. "Because if I just storm in there and start yelling, it will give him time to delete everything else. I want to know why he abandoned our mother, and what he's been hiding for the past 5 months." For the first time, Laura didn't argue. She just said, "Then let's go to the Serenity Springs Center." I nodded. Before leaving the hospital, I looked back at the hallway where my mother had once lain, waiting for her son to return. No one could say how many times she had looked at the door that night. Only one thing was clear. Leo hadn't lost our mother. He was the one who left her behind. Returning from the county hospital, I didn't go to the office. I drove straight to the Serenity Springs Rehabilitation Center. Laura sat beside me, her hands clutching her old tote bag. Throughout the drive, she didn't ask what I was thinking. Perhaps after all these years, she understood that my silence wasn't always a sign of calmness. Often, it was just a man's way of hiding his shame. Serenity Springs was located on a quiet street on the west side of the city. It was a 4-story building painted cream, with a brightly lit sign out front. Dedicated recovery, care like family. I stared at the words, a lump forming in my throat. My own family had used the name of this place to deceive me for months. At the reception desk, I provided my mother's information and asked for her treatment history. The receptionist checked her computer, then looked up. Susan Miller was admitted on April 27th of last year and discharged on April 30th. I thought I had misheard. Could you please check again? My mother was here for nearly 5 months. The receptionist turned the monitor toward me. I'm sorry, sir. The data only shows a 3-day stay. The person who handled the paperwork was Mr. Leo Miller. On the 3rd day, the family requested to discharge the patient, stating they had hired a home caregiver. Laura, standing behind me, quietly tightened her grip on her bag strap. I took out my phone and played the videos Hannah had sent me. In the first video, my mother was lying in a bed by the window. The second showed her practicing lifting her arm. The third was of a woman in a uniform massaging her leg. The videos had been sent weeks apart, sometimes with a message like, "Mom's making more progress today, Hank." I showed the phone to the receptionist. "Were these videos filmed here?" She called over an older nurse. The nurse glanced at the video and nodded. "Yes, that's the private room on the 3rd floor. But that lady was only here for 3 days." I pointed to a video that had been sent in August. "What about this one?" The head nurse zoomed in on the screen, pointing to a faint crack near an electrical outlet. "It's the same room. That crack was there before the renovations in May. We patched it up after that." Laura leaned in. "The curtains are the same too. The bottom hook on the right side is broken." I scrolled through each video, comparing them. Indeed, the sunlight from the window, the water pitcher on the table, the purple towel draped over the headboard, they were all identical. Hannah had filmed multiple clips over the course of a few days, and then sent them to me sporadically to make me think our mother was still receiving treatment. I asked, "Is there any way to check the original file dates?" A technician checked the files Hannah had sent. Some of the videos still had their metadata. The creation dates were all within the 3 days Susan Miller had been at the center. I remembered the times Hannah had called, telling me Mom had just finished her therapy session and was too tired to talk. One day, I was about to drop everything at the warehouse and drive down, but Leo called and said, "Your visit will just make her emotional. Let us handle her care. You focus on the company." I had been touched by his words. Now, thinking back, every expression of concern was just another bolt on the door. I pulled out the photo of the document with my mother's thumbprint. Did the center issue this document? The receptionist studied it for a long time before calling down the records supervisor. He compared the document number, the letterhead, and the seal, then said cautiously, "This document is not in Mrs. Miller's file. The document number on this photo belongs to a physical therapy confirmation for a different patient." I asked, "So this is a forgery?" He shook his head. "We don't have the authority to make that conclusion. But the use of the center's name, the document number, and the image of the seal are inconsistent with our records. We will file an internal report and cooperate with the authorities if requested." The answer was clear enough. Hannah had taken a legitimate document, replaced the content, and affixed our mother's thumbprint below the new text. Where that thumbprint came from, I didn't know yet. I signed the incident report, requesting they keep a copy of the photo and the related data. Laura stood beside me, silent. Perhaps she was afraid I would lose my temper again, but this time, the anger inside me didn't erupt. It settled, cold and heavy as stone. Leaving the center, I sat in the car and opened my bank's app, scrolling through my transfer history. 5 months, $4,500 each month, for a total of $22,500. The memo for each transfer was clearly marked, Mom's medication and rehab. I had also sent 2 additional payments for nutritional supplements and overnight care. I called the number of the pharmacy printed on the receipts Hannah had sent. The pharmacist checked and said they had only sold Leo a few common medications, totaling less than $300. The amount on the receipts was many times higher. I then called the woman who appeared in the video massaging my mother's leg. She confirmed she had only been hired for 2 sessions. The young man, Leo, told me to wear a uniform and stand next to the old lady to make the video look good. I finished the job, but he still owes me for one session. I asked if she had cared for my mother after that. No. I thought the family had taken her back to their hometown. The call ended. The car was silent. Laura looked out the window. You see, Hank? They didn't need to care for your mother for long. They just needed to create enough proof to keep you reassured, and to keep the money coming, I added. It's not just about the money. I turned to her. Laura spoke slowly. If they only wanted the money, Leo could have hired a cheaper caregiver and kept the difference. But he abandoned her at the hospital, forged a document giving him power of attorney, blocked all communication, and made you believe she was still here. He wanted your mother to disappear from your sight. Her words made me remember my mother's reaction when I had mentioned Leo's name. She wasn't just sad, she was afraid. I called my bank's fraud department and requested a printout of all transactions to Leo's account. Then I messaged my assistant to back up all folders related to family expenses, with strict instructions not to inform Leo or Hannah. Laura asked, "You're not going to confront them yet?" I want to know what they were doing during that time. Just then, my phone lit up with a notification from a family group chat. Hannah had just posted a video of my mother in the cramped apartment, with the caption, "Hank's ex-wife has been hiding our mother-in-law in a tiny room, not letting her children see her. The family has been patient for too long." I opened the video. The angle was familiar. It was the same video Laura had sent to the company account as a plea for help. But the part where she said, "Mom is out of medication, please have a family member come, complete the paperwork," had been completely cut out. Hannah was no longer just creating a fake treatment facility to deceive me. She was now using our mother's actual dire situation to frame Laura as the villain. Hannah's post was less than half an hour old, but it already had over 30 comments. Some asked if it was true, others viciously attacked Laura, and a few had already taken screenshots and forwarded them to our extended family's group chat. I called Hannah, but she didn't answer. I called Leo, his phone was off. Laura looked at the caption under the video, her face no longer angry, just weary, as if she had expected this all along. "I'm going back to Mom. I'll go with you. You should stay and handle your business. This involves my mother and you. I can't stay out of it anymore." Laura didn't reply. She hailed a cab back to the apartment complex. I followed in my car. When we reached the end of the alley, there were 7 or 8 people standing in front of the apartment door. Most of them were relatives from my side of the family, all holding up their phones. Cameras on. An aunt saw Laura and immediately raised her voice. "Do you have any shame keeping your ex-mother-in-law in a place like this? You've been divorced for almost 3 years. Can't you just leave our family alone?" Laura walked quickly to the door, not engaging in the argument. "Please keep your voices down. My mother is very weak, and her blood pressure can spike easily." The woman sneered, still calling her mother so sweetly. "If you really cared, you would have returned her to her own sons." Laura unlocked the door and was about to go inside when a man stepped in her way, shoving his phone in her face. "Tell us, are you holding her hostage to get money from Hank?" I pushed his phone aside. "Put the phone down." He turned to me. "Hank? You're here just in time. How could you let an outsider kidnap your mother for months and not know anything?" The word outsider made Laura flinch, but she said nothing. She squeezed past the crowd, went into the room, and closed the door. From outside, I could still hear her soothing my mother. "It's okay, Mom, just lie still. There's nothing going on out here." A few people started pounding on the door, demanding that Laura bring Susan out for a video interrogation. I stood in front of the door. "No one is going in. My mother is sick." My aunt placed her hands on her hips. "Are you still bewitched by her?" Hannah posted the proof. "She's keeping your mother in that room. She definitely has a motive." I pulled up the video that was circulating. "Do you know where this video came from?" Hannah filmed it, of course. "No. This is the video Laura sent to my company's account, pleading for help. The part where she says Mom needed medicine and for a family member to come has been edited out." The crowd quieted down, but one person still muttered, "Are you just going to take your ex-wife's word for it? Maybe she's putting on an act." Just then, Mrs. Gable, the landlady from the first apartment in the complex, came out. She was holding a basket of vegetables, her face flushed with anger. An act? I rent this place to her. I know best. My aunt asked, "Who are you?" "I'm the landlady. Laura brought the old lady here over 4 months ago. She's paid her rent on time every month. In the morning, she helps her mother with her exercises. At noon, she cooks her soup. At night, she does her laundry. One night, the old lady had a fever and she stayed up all night. I came over to help for 2 hours and I was exhausted." Mrs. Gable slammed her basket down. "If you people really care about a sick person, you should bring medicine and food, not shove a phone in her face and call it family love." Someone whispered, "But she's divorced. Where did she get the money to care for her?" Mrs. Gable retorted immediately. "She does bookkeeping at night, sometimes until 2 a.m. If she's short on money, she asks me for a few days' extension. She has never asked your family for a single dollar. I see how she lives. Don't just believe a video with no context and then come here to play judge and jury in my alley." Laura opened the door. She had probably heard everything. Her voice was steady. "I am not holding her for money. The hospital called me. No one else came, so I took care of her. That's all." The man from before still tried to argue. "If you're so innocent, why did you lock the door?" Laura looked at him. "Because inside is a sick person, not a piece of merchandise for you all to film from every angle. An innocent person may not fear death, but even a straight tree feels the pain when it's being chopped down." The alley fell silent. I opened the old phone Laura had shown me the day before. In the sent folder was the original, unedited video. I turned up the volume, and Laura's voice filled the air. "Mom is very weak. She only has 2 days of medication left. I don't have the authority to make long-term treatment decisions. Please have Hank or Leo come to the hospital to handle the paperwork and pick her up." Then came the sound of my mother, Susan, mumbling Leo's name. I held up my phone next to Hannah's edited version. The beginning and end were identical. Only the plea for help was missing. I looked at each person. The county hospital has confirmed that Laura did not kidnap my mother. The Serenity Springs Rehabilitation Center has also confirmed that my mother was only there for 3 days, not the 5 months that Leo and Hannah claimed. Anyone who continues to film or post images of a sick person, or who accuses Laura of holding someone for ransom, will be held responsible for their words. My aunt looked flustered. "We were just worried about Susan. Since my mother has been here, has any of you asked what she's eaten or what medication she needs?" No one answered. One person quietly lowered their phone, another deleted the video they had just recorded. They left in small groups, the shouting gone. I didn't turn to apologize to Laura in front of everyone. Doing so would have made the apology feel like a performance, a way for me to feel like a good person. I went into the room and checked my mother's blood pressure, following the instructions on the machine. The reading was higher than it had been in the morning. Susan was breathing heavily, her right hand cold. I said, "We need to take her back to the hospital to get checked out." Laura nodded. She gathered the bag of medication. "Mrs. Gable helped fold the blanket and held the door open. In the car, my mother held Laura's hand, not mine. I looked at the two of them, a pain twisting in my gut like a slow-turning screw. After the doctor confirmed that my mother's blood pressure had spiked due to stress, I was finally able to breathe. Laura was sitting at the end of the hallway, her head bowed, rubbing her wrists. I walked over. "I made things clear with everyone today." Laura looked up. "You did the right thing." I waited for something more, but there was nothing. She was still angry with me. Laura was silent for a few seconds. "You stood up for the truth today. I acknowledge that. But 3 years ago, you also stood in the middle of a crowd. When they called me a cheating wife, you didn't say a single word. I couldn't find any words to defend myself." Laura looked through the glass window at my mother, who was on an IV drip. "One right action doesn't erase the day you let your entire family humiliate your wife." She stood up and walked into the room. I sat alone on the cold, plastic chair. It was only then that I understood that what was happening didn't just start the day my mother was left at the hospital. It started nearly 3 years ago, the day I looked at a photograph, listened to a few lies, and single-handedly closed the book on an 18-year marriage. Nearly 3 years ago, my company, Hometown Essentials, was facing its toughest period. 2 of our largest distributors had suddenly stopped placing orders. Our money was tied up in inventory, and the bank was calling about our loan. I was practically living out of my car, driving from one county in the morning to another state by night, trying to find new buyers. At the time, Laura was still our in-house accountant. My brother, Leo, was in charge of purchasing and warehouse logistics, and his wife, Hannah, handled payments. I believed this arrangement was both convenient and secure. Strangers might cheat you, but who in their right mind would drill a hole in the boat their own family was on? One evening, Laura placed 3 invoices for component parts on my desk. "Can you take a look at this, Hank?" I was on the phone and signing a delivery order at the same time, so I only glanced at them. "Let's talk about it in the morning." "I'm swamped." Laura pulled up a chair. "These 3 invoices show a delivery of 80 sets of filter cores, but the warehouse only has 52. The purchase price is also higher than last month's price list." I frowned. Maybe the rest of the shipment is still in transit? The invoice has been closed out for the full amount. Leo has been managing the warehouse for years. Don't start suspecting family just because of a small discrepancy. Laura looked at me for a long time, then gathered the papers. "I'm not suspecting a person, Hank. I'm questioning the numbers." I should have remembered that line, but at the time, I just thought my wife was being too rigid. A few weeks later, Laura started coming home late. One night, it was almost 10 p.m., when she walked in, her clothes damp from the rain. I asked where she had been. She just said, "Meeting with someone to cross-reference some documents." "Who?" "I'll tell you when I'm sure." That answer bruised my ego. Meanwhile, Hannah was acting concerned. One afternoon, she brought her phone to my office. "Hank, I don't know if I should show you this." She opened a photo. It was Laura, sitting in a coffee shop with Mr. Marcus Thorne, the owner of Thorne Enterprises. Thorne was a few years older than me, his company several times the size of Hometown Essentials. In the photo, he was leaning slightly toward Laura. On the table was a file folder. The angle of the shot made it look like they were having an intimate conversation. I asked, "Was anyone else there?" Hannah shook her head. "I only saw the 2 of them." I would later find out that Mrs. Thorne, Marcus's wife, was sitting directly across from them. Hannah had deliberately stood at an angle that cut her out of the frame. But I didn't know that then. Hannah also showed me screenshots of text messages. Phrases like, "Please keep this confidential," and "Don't let Hank know yet, and I'll meet you at the usual place," were strung together to create a suspicious narrative. That evening, I asked Laura, "What were you doing meeting with Marcus Thorne?" Laura was washing vegetables. Hearing the way I spoke, she froze. "Were you following me?" "I'm asking you what you were doing with him." "I was cross-referencing some company business." "What kind of business requires you to hide it from your husband?" Laura turned off the faucet. "Because it involves Leo, and I don't have enough proof yet. If you knew, you would call him in right away, and all the evidence would disappear." I lost my temper. "Do you really think I'm that reckless?" Laura looked me straight in the eye. "You're a very level-headed man, Hank. But when it comes to Leo, you always assume I'm just trying to make things difficult for your little brother." That felt like an insult. I stormed out without another word. A few days later, Hannah continued to add fuel to the fire. She claimed Laura was secretly texting Thorne at night. Leo pretended to defend her. Maybe Laura was just asking for advice. Don't think the worst of her. The more he said, the more I felt like the clueless husband everyone in the family pitied. The breaking point came one evening late in the year. Laura came home, put her purse on a chair, and went into the bedroom to change. Hannah came over to give me some payment slips and accidentally knocked the purse to the floor. An envelope fell out. Inside was $3,500 in cash. Hannah's face went pale. "Where did Laura get this much money?" Laura came out and saw the envelope, and she froze. "I don't know." I picked up the stack of bills. "You don't know, but it was in your purse?" Laura searched through her bag, her voice frantic. "Someone put it there." "I didn't have this envelope this morning," Hannah said timidly. "I saw you meeting with Mr. Thorne near the office this afternoon." Laura spun around. "You were following me." Hannah immediately recoiled, her eyes welling up. "I just happened to see you. Please don't yell at me." Leo walked in at that exact moment. He looked at the money, then at Laura, his expression one of profound betrayal. "If you needed money, you should have just said something to the family. Why would you take money from a business partner?" Laura insisted it wasn't Thorne's money. "Then whose is it?" It's about $3,500 that a distributor returned because of a mistaken shipment. But that money should be in the accounting department. Hannah denied it. I never handled any such payment. I didn't let Laura explain any further. In my mind, all I could see was the photo in the coffee shop, the cropped text messages, and the envelope of cash in my wife's purse. My mother, Susan, came in from the back room. Hannah, crying, told her how Laura had been secretly meeting with Thorne and was now in possession of a large sum of unexplained cash. Susan had always favored Leo, her youngest. Hearing that the issue involved bookkeeping and her youngest son, she immediately took his side. She pointed at Laura. "Are you trying to frame Leo? He's worked for you and his brother for years. If he made a mistake, we should handle it as a family. Why are you conspiring with an outsider?" Laura pulled out a folder of purchase orders. "Mom, I'm not trying to frame anyone. I just want to clarify the inflated inventory numbers. If we let this continue, the company will lose a lot more." Susan snatched the folder from her and threw it into the fireplace, where embers were still glowing. Laura lunged for it, but it was too late. The edges of the paper curled, and the flames licked at the columns of numbers, turning them to black ash. "What are you doing? This family doesn't need a daughter-in-law who uses paperwork to divide brothers. If you found a wealthy man to support you, then go to him." Laura turned to me. She wasn't crying. She just asked, "Do you think the same way as your mother?" I looked at the envelope on the table, then at the photo Hannah had sent me. I had the chance to ask my wife for the whole story, from beginning to end, but I didn't. I said, "If you have any respect left for this family, then stop denying it." Laura's face went white. She went into the bedroom, packed a few clothes into a small suitcase, and placed her house keys on the table. "In 18 years of being your wife, I have never taken a single dollar that wasn't mine. If you don't believe me today, then nothing I say will matter." My mother turned her back. Leo lowered his head. Hannah stood behind her husband, her lips pressed into a tight line. I still didn't stop Laura from leaving. 2 months later, we signed the divorce papers. It was an uncontested divorce. The day we left the courthouse, it was raining. I saw Marcus Thorne's car pull up to the curb. Laura got into the back seat. I didn't see Mrs. Thorne in the front passenger seat. I only saw the part of the picture that fit the narrative I had already chosen to believe. Nearly 3 years later, sitting in a hospital hallway, I finally understood that the photograph hadn't destroyed my marriage. I had. Because I had allowed my pride to be the judge, and a piece of staged evidence to be the verdict. The next morning, I called Marcus Thorne. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, he just said, "Come to my office. We should clear this up once and for all." Thorne Enterprises was in an industrial park north of the city. I had been there many times to sign contracts, but that morning, as I walked through the familiar glass doors, I felt like I was walking into a place that would redefine my own life. Thorne was not alone. Beside him sat his wife, a file folder, now old, placed in front of her. As soon as she saw me, she said bluntly, "Mr. Miller, I am here today because nearly 3 years ago, someone deliberately erased me from a photograph." I pulled up a chair, my throat dry. Thorne opened his phone and showed me the complete, uncropped photo. Laura was on the left, Thorne on the right, and his wife was in the center, holding a price list. The section of the photo Hannah had shown me had been perfectly cropped to include only Laura and Thorne. His wife pointed to herself in the photo. I ordered coffee for all 3 of us that day. Laura came to ask about the number of components your company had received. We talked business for over an hour, and then we all went our separate ways. I remembered Laura's eyes when I had accused her. She had tried to tell me a third person was there, but I had dismissed it as an excuse. Thorne showed me another photo. This was the day you two left the courthouse. In the photo, his car was parked on the side of the road. His wife was in the front seat, turned around, opening the back door for Laura. It was pouring rain. Laura was standing on the curb, clutching a paper bag. His wife said, "That day, my husband and I happened to see Laura standing in the rain. I told him to pull over and give her a ride. The person who took the photo chose the perfect angle to hide me from view." I asked, "Where did Laura go after that?" "She rented an apartment near her new job. She never lived with us, nor did she ever accept any money from my husband." Thorne looked at me. "I don't blame you for being jealous, Hank. But you never gave your wife a chance to tell her side of the story. I didn't argue. He opened the file folder on the table. Inside were delivery slips, original invoices, and reconciliation statements from nearly 3 years ago. Each page had signatures, dates, and clear item codes. Laura discovered that the purchase orders at your company were for a higher quantity than what we had delivered. She was afraid to tell you right away because she thought Leo would delete the data, so she asked me to keep it confidential. I flipped through the pages. In the Hometown Essentials system, many component parts were marked as fully received. In Thorn Enterprises records, the actual quantity delivered was dozens of units lower. At the back of the folder was a tripartite reconciliation agreement signed by Laura, Thorn, and Leo. When I read the total discrepancy, my hand froze. $23,500. Below, in Leo's handwriting, it said, "I acknowledge the discrepancy in the inventory and commit to repaying the full amount within 6 months." The signature was unmistakably his. I asked, "Why was this agreement never shown to me?" Thorn replied, "Because Laura wanted to handle it internally. Your mother was also present at the time." I turned to Laura. She was sitting one chair away from me, her hands clasped tightly. "You knew Leo took the money and you still hid it from me?" This was the first time in days I had called her by her first name. Laura didn't look away. I knew he had made a mistake with one amount. I didn't know it had grown into something this big. "But you didn't tell me." "That's right." Laura looked down at the file. "The day we signed that agreement, your mother got down on her knees in Mr. Thorne's office. She held my hand and begged me not to tell you, not to let the documents leave the room. She said Leo was still young, that he had only made a foolish mistake because of some debts. She was afraid that if the truth came out, it would tear the family apart." Thorne's wife sighed softly. "I was there. We tried to get her to stand up, but she just kept crying." Laura continued, "I thought $23,500 was the end of it. I made Leo sign the repayment plan, demanding monthly payments. I believed that if I just gave him a way out, he would stop. I asked, did he pay it back? He made 2 payments of $1,000 each for the first 2 months. After that, he always had an excuse. So why did you stay silent?" Laura looked up. "Because I was afraid your mother would fall ill. Because I was afraid you and your brother would come to blows. But I was wrong. I didn't betray you, Hank, but I did betray my own principles by covering up something wrong. I accept that I was wrong to do that." I never expected her to take part of the blame. I had hoped to hear that Laura was completely innocent, so that all the fault could be placed on Leo, Hannah, and my mother. But the truth wasn't that clean. Laura had been swayed by compassion. My mother had shown favoritism, and I had been a fool. We had all played a part, but the one who had pushed our marriage off the cliff was me. I asked Thorn, "What about the $3,500 in Laura's purse?" He pulled out a shipping receipt. "A distributor returned it because you sent the wrong model. The money was given to Hannah to put back into the company funds. After that, it ended up in Laura's purse. We only found out about it when Laura called to ask." His wife added, "Laura cried a lot back then, not because she had lost her husband, but because the man she had lived with for 18 years believed an envelope of cash over her own words." I looked at Laura. She wasn't crying anymore. Perhaps the tears she had for me had long since run dry. I asked, "What about the text messages between you and Mr. Thorne?" Thorne showed me the full, unedited printout. The crop sentences were part of a clear exchange. "Please keep the list of item codes confidential. Don't let Hank know yet. I'm afraid he'll call Leo in right away. I'll meet you at the usual place with your wife." Just a few more lines, and all the suspicion vanished. I sat in silence, then said, "Laura, I'm sorry." She replied softly, "You should apologize to the truth first. Because for nearly 3 years, you've lived very comfortably with a verdict that was never proven." Her words hurt, but they were true. I closed the file. If you were faced with a mother's plea to protect her son, would you keep quiet to maintain peace in the family, or would you speak up to prevent a bigger mistake? What secrets did the notebook Susan kept mentioning hold, and why was Leo so terrified of his mother regaining her memory? At Thorn Enterprises, I took copies of the reconciliation agreement and all the original invoices. The story of Laura's affair was over, but a new truth had just begun. 3 years ago, Leo had taken $23,500 and been forgiven. And that forgiveness, without limits, had taught him that as long as he bowed his head low enough, his family would always clear a path for him. I left Thorn Enterprises with the file on the passenger seat. Every time I stopped at a red light, I would look at the repayment agreement with Leo's signature, as if staring at it would make the $23,500 disappear. But the black and white of the paper didn't care for family ties. That afternoon, I returned to the hospital. My mother was sitting up in bed, propped against the headboard. Laura was using a warm cloth to wipe each of her fingers. As soon as she saw me, my mother started to stir, her mouth trying to form disjointed words. Cab. In. Et. I pulled a chair closer. What cabinet, Mom? Susan frowned, her right hand trembling as she pointed toward Laura. Laura thought for a moment, then opened her worn tote bag. Are you talking about this, Mom? She pulled out a small, tarnished brass key with a red thread tied to it. I asked, Where did you get that? It was in your mother's coat pocket the day I picked her up from the county hospital. I thought it was for a personal locker, so I kept it. She tried to say something about a warehouse back then, but no one could understand her. My mother looked at the key and nodded repeatedly, then managed to string together a few words. Bottom, old, cabinet. I understood immediately. In the company's warranty repair warehouse, there was a row of old metal cabinets from my father's time. Leo had suggested selling them for scrap metal several times, but my mother had insisted on keeping them. The next morning, I took Laura to the company without telling Leo or Hannah. They had both texted, saying they needed to take a personal day to deal with some family matters. The warranty warehouse was behind the main showroom. I led Laura to a moss green metal cabinet against the wall. The first lock didn't fit, nor did the second. It was the bottom drawer. The key turned halfway and then got stuck. I had to use a few drops of machine oil before I heard a dry click. Inside, there was no blue notebook, just 3 yellowed cash receipts, a piece of paper with 3 phone numbers and 3 distributor codes: HL17, IT4, and VP22. Laura picked up the receipts. This is Hannah's signature. All 3 receipts were marked paid in full, cash. Below was my sister-in-law's familiar signature. But when I checked the system, all 3 distributors were still listed as having outstanding balances. I called the head of sales and asked who distributor HL17 was. That's Huang Lurk's agency in Nam Son County, sir. They have an outstanding debt of over $8,200, so we stopped shipping to them 3 months ago. I looked at the number on the receipt, $8,200, and IT4 Yenthu Electronics owed $4,600. VP22 Varn Fook Store owed $4,000. A total of exactly $16,800. I didn't summon the clients to the office. Laura and I drove to each location ourselves. I wanted to see with my own eyes how these numbers had been twisted into false accusations. Huang Lurk's agency was next to the Nam Son County market. The owner, Mr. Lurk, had been buying from my father since he was delivering fans in a small pickup truck. As soon as he saw me, he crossed his arms. Director Miller, here to collect another debt? I replied, I'm here to ask if you've paid the $8,200 balance. Mr. Luke scoffed, opened a wooden cabinet behind the counter, and pulled out his copy of the cash receipt. On June 12th, I gave the full amount to that woman, Hannah. She counted it right in front of me, signed, and stamped it. A month later, your company was still sending me notices. I called Leo, and he said it was a software glitch and he would fix it. I never saw any fix, only that my shipments were cut off. I placed the receipt I found in the cabinet next to his. The receipt number, date, and amount were a perfect match. Did anyone witness this? Yes. My son and your company's driver. The security camera footage is probably long gone by now. Laura asked. Do you still have the text messages with Leo? Mr. Look opened his phone. In the chat, Leo had written clearly, I can confirm you've paid in full. The system just hasn't updated yet. Don't worry about it. I asked him to send me a photo of his receipt and a copy of the text messages. Before we left, he said, I've been in business for decades. If I owe money, I admit it. But to be called a deadbeat after I've already paid, it's humiliating, Mr. Miller. His words reminded me of Laura. Some debts don't exist, but once they're written down, the innocent still have to bear the shame. Yenthu Electronics was about 30 miles away. The owner, Miss Thu, pulled out her receipt as soon as she saw me. I guard this thing more carefully than my property deed. Otherwise, who would believe I paid? She told us that the day she paid, Hannah had claimed the software was down for maintenance and wrote a manual receipt. A few weeks later, the debt was still on her account. Leo kept making excuses and told her not to make a big deal out of it. I asked, "Did the company announce any software maintenance on those days?" Laura shook her head. "No. If the system was down, the accounting department would have been notified. I never signed off on any such notice." Our last stop was Varn Fook store, in a town by the river. The owner, Mr. Fook, not only had the receipt but also a recording of a call with Hannah. In it, Hannah said, "Just hold on to the receipt. We'll clear the debt later." "It's just a reconciliation issue." Mr. Fook lowered his voice. "The strangest thing was, the night I paid, I saw that silver van that Quinn drives pull up to your company. It was only carrying a few light boxes. But the next morning, Leo was bragging about a new shipment of components worth several $100,000. I asked for the license plate number. The last 4 digits he gave me matched the van Quinn usually drove. Laura turned to me. "These 3 distributors are probably not the only ones." I knew she was right. The 3 receipts in the cabinet were just the tip of the iceberg. The roots of the problem likely ran much deeper. On the way back, I called the IT department and requested a log of all system maintenance notifications over the past 3 years. The initial report showed that none of them coincided with the dates Hannah had written the 3 receipts. I ordered them to seal the official receipt book, back up all accounts receivable data, and temporarily suspend all delete or edit functions on the administrative accounts. Laura looked at the 3 photocopies in her hand. Leo and Hannah weren't just taking money from the inventory. They were turning people who had paid in full into debtors, so that no one would dare question where the money went. I gripped the steering wheel. I had always thought the losses were just a few inflated purchase orders. But Hannah's 3 signatures had opened up a whole new path of deception. Real money had been collected. Real receipts had been written. Only the truth had been erased from the system. And behind those 3 payments, Quinn's silver van began to emerge like a shadow that was no longer content to stay hidden. That evening, I didn't go straight home. I stayed in my office, drew the blinds, and pulled up the entire payment history to a company called Northern Supply. I had only glanced at the name before, treating it like any other minor supplier. On paper, Northern Supply specialized in components for water purifiers, electric stoves, and warranty parts. The owner was listed as Quinn, Hannah's cousin. I went through each invoice: control boards, filter cores, solenoid valves, power cords, heating elements. The sheer volume was enough to make one believe the company was constantly stocking up for warranty repairs. But when I added it all up, a chill went down my spine. In the last 18 months alone, Hometown Essentials had paid Northern Supply over $100,000. I called the head of the technical department, a man named Dave who had been with the company since my father's time. I asked him, "On average, how many control boards does your department replace each month?" Dave thought for a moment. "During peak season, maybe 30 or 40, usually less." I turned the monitor toward him. "Then why does this invoice show we purchased 126 inches one month?" Dave stared at the screen, his expression changing. "I don't remember any shipment that large. If we had, the warranty warehouse would be overflowing." "Did you sign for it?" "We only receive parts transferred from the main warehouse. The master purchase orders are managed by Mr. Leo." I asked about the filter cores and valves. The answer was the same. The number of parts actually used was far lower than the number paid for. Laura, sitting beside me, took a blank notebook and drew 3 columns. Quantity on invoice, quantity received by tech debt, and quantity used for warranty, she said. "The discrepancy can't just be from inventory surplus. We need to check the serial numbers." Dave immediately opened the warranty software. Every genuine control board and filter core has a lot-specific serial number. When entered into the system, that number must be linked to a specific repair order or product. We cross-referenced 20 serial numbers as a test. 7 of them matched components that had been removed from floor models. 5 belonged to products that had been liquidated the previous year. 3 had already been used in a warranty repair and then reappeared in a new purchase order. 1 even belonged to the water purifier in the company's own break room. I looked at the string of numbers on the screen and laughed dryly. It seems like anything can be resurrected these days. Even old component serial numbers are being brought back to life to siphon money. Laura didn't laugh. This wasn't a one-person job. Someone approved the purchase, someone else altered the data, and a third person legitimized the supply chain. I nodded. Leo had the authority to approve purchases. Hannah was in charge of reconciling payments. Quinn's company issued the invoices. The three of them were positioned at different points in the chain, enough to make a non-existent product complete a full cycle on paper. The next morning, Laura and I drove to the registered address for Northern Supply. It was a single-story house at the end of a narrow lane, the garage door shut tight. The company sign was faded and hanging crookedly. I asked the woman at the corner convenience store, "Is this company still in business?" She glanced at the sign and waved her hand dismissively. "Business? Someone comes by to pick up mail sometimes, but I've never seen a delivery truck come or go. Is there a warehouse out back?" Behind the house is a patch of banana trees. What warehouse? A business that was issuing invoices for hundreds of thousands of dollars in components each month had no warehouse, no technicians, and no signs of actual deliveries. I took a photo of the building and returned to the office, where I had the IT department pull the edit history for the purchase orders. The results appeared in a chronological log. Many of the orders had been altered late at night, some close to midnight. The initial quantities were for just a few boxes, which were later tripled or quadrupled. The edits were made from Leo's administrative account, but the IP address of the device used belonged to the computer in Hannah's payment processing office. I called in the night shift warehouse worker, a young man named Tim, who looked nervous. "On these nights, did you see any deliveries from Northern Supply?" Tim looked at the list and shook his head. Quinn's van came by a few times, but it only dropped off 5 or 6 boxes. They were light. 2 people could carry them easily. Then why did the morning report show nearly 200 units? I don't know. We clock out based on the actual count. In the morning, Mr. Leo would say the purchasing department had adjusted the order because a portion was being sent directly to the county service center. Was there a direct delivery receipt? I've never seen one. Another worker confirmed that one time, Quinn's van was in the lot for less than 10 minutes before leaving. Leo had still insisted they record the delivery as complete, according to the paperwork. I asked, "Why didn't you report this to me?" Tim looked down. "Mr. Leo is your brother, and he's in charge of the warehouse. We just assumed you two had already discussed it." That phrase again. People kept quiet because they thought my brother and I were on the same page. And I was in the dark because I trusted my brother would never do something like this. Laura said quietly, "When power is combined with family ties, it's very difficult for subordinates to speak up. Everyone is afraid that telling the truth will be seen as trying to divide the owner's family. I ordered the log to be saved, access to the data to be restricted, an official report of the current situation to be drawn up, and an independent auditor to be hired. I didn't call Leo in for a confrontation. If I tipped him off now, he would find a way to clean up anything outside the system. I called Quinn. The phone rang for a long time before someone answered. "Quinn, I need to check on some of the component shipments from Northern Supply." Quinn laughed nervously. "Oh man, we've made a lot of shipments. How am I supposed to remember a specific one?" "Where's your warehouse?" Quinn hesitated. We rent a space. Let me ask the accountant, and I'll send you the address. How many delivery people does Northern Supply have? It depends on the season. I asked him directly. Is your silver van the one you usually use for deliveries to Hometown Essentials? The line went silent. Quinn spoke quickly. The paperwork was all provided by Leo. I just deliver what he asks. You should talk to him about it. Then he hung up. Before I could call back, the hospital called. My mother had just woken up and was insistently asking for me. When I arrived, I had only just mentioned that I was looking into Quinn's van when my mother suddenly slammed her right hand on the bed. Laura quickly supported her. "Mom, calm down. What are you trying to say?" Susan managed to lift her head, her breathing ragged, her lips trembling. Each word was a struggle. Notebook. In the fan. I leaned in closer. "In Quinn's van, Mom?" She nodded repeatedly, her eyes wide. "He hasn't found it." Laura and I looked at each other. The blue notebook wasn't in the filing cabinet. My mother had hidden it in Quinn's silver van. And all this time, Leo and Hannah weren't just trying to cover up their financial fraud. They were hunting for a notebook that they didn't even know the location of. Dr. Evans wouldn't let me question my mother any further that day. She pulled Laura and me to the end of the hallway. Mr. Miller, memory after a stroke doesn't just come back all at once, like opening a drawer and pulling out a whole story. Sometimes, the patient only remembers an image, a sound, or a feeling of fear. If you push her to talk continuously, she could become agitated, and her blood pressure will rise. I asked, "So, how can we help her remember without endangering her?" Use familiar things. Old photos, old objects, people's names, license plate numbers. Ask short questions, don't lead her. When she gets tired, stop. Laura nodded. The blue notebook could be the key to connecting all the financial discrepancies. But the person holding that secret was my mother, a woman who was having to relearn how to speak one word at a time. The next afternoon, Laura brought a bag of old photos from the house behind the company. There was a photo of my father in front of the store, a photo of my mother writing in a ledger, a photo of Leo helping to load boxes, and a photo of Quinn's silver van parked next to the warehouse. Laura placed each photo in front of my mother. "Look, Mom. This is the old store, right?" Susan touched the photo and nodded slightly. I kept my voice calm. "Mom, do you remember Quinn's van?" Laura held up the photo of the van. My mother immediately curled her right hand into a fist, her breathing quickening. Dr. Evans, who was nearby, reminded us. Slowly. Let her speak on her own. After a moment, my mother managed to say, "Van. Parked. In the yard." I asked if she had ever been in the van. She shook her head. Hid. The notebook. Laura didn't press further. She gave our mother a sip of water and then showed her the photocopies of the 3 cash receipts. "Have you ever seen papers like this before?" Her eyes fixated on Hannah's signature. Hannah took the money. Piece by piece, the memories began to surface. They were fragmented, but they were enough for us to put the story together. After Laura was forced out of the house, my mother still believed that Leo had only made one mistake out of desperation. She thought the $23,500 repayment agreement would be enough to scare him straight. But a few months later, she started hearing from old distributors, complaining that they had paid their bills but were still being hounded for the money. My mother didn't understand software or electronic invoices, but she had sold goods alongside my father. She remembered who had paid and who hadn't, the way a longtime merchant does. She started to keep a record. When Hannah brought home a receipt, she wrote down the customer's name. When Quinn's van came into the yard at night, she wrote down the license plate and the number of boxes. Once, she saw Leo carrying a black bag of money from the accounting office to the van, and she wrote down the time. She used a standard blue school notebook, writing in large, shaky letters. Next to each entry, she made a red dot. I asked, "Why didn't you just call me?" She looked at me for a long time. "You were busy." Leo heard. It turned out that many times, Leo had been the one to answer the phone for her. He would tell her I was traveling for work and that she should just tell him if she needed anything. One day, she asked for my assistant's number. Leo told her it had been changed. Laura asked quietly, "Were you afraid that Leo would find out about the notebook?" She nodded. One afternoon, she overheard Hannah in the kitchen. "The old woman is always writing in that thing. You need to search her room tomorrow. If we leave it for too long, there will be trouble." My mother knew she couldn't keep the notebook in the house. Just then, the rear door of Quinn's van broke, and he had to leave it in the company yard overnight. She waited until no one was around, wrapped the notebook in 2 plastic bags, and shoved it behind a loose panel on the left side of the cargo area, near the toolkit. I asked, "How did you know you could open that panel?" She smirked slightly. "Your father taught me." My father used to fix his own cars. She had often sat with him, handing him wrenches, so she knew there was a hollow space behind the panel. She had planned to ask Mr. Baker, a longtime distributor, to bring me a note the next morning with the location of the notebook. But that night, Leo discovered that she had called Mr. Baker. Laura placed a hand on her shoulder. "Mom, take a break." She shook her head. Her eyes were wide, as if she had reached the part of the memory that terrified her the most. Leo grabbed The phone. That night, Susan had been about to call me. Leo walked in and snatched the phone from her hand. "What are you calling Hank for?" she asked. Leo replied, "You're old, Mom. Let us handle the company business." She told him she knew about the stolen distributor payments and that Northern Supply wasn't delivering all the goods. She demanded to see me the next morning. Hannah, hearing this, closed the door, bolted it from the inside, and pulled a chair in front of my mother. "What did you write down? Where's the notebook?" Susan didn't answer. Leo started tearing through the drawers, flipping the mattress, and dumping out boxes of clothes. Hannah searched the family altar, looking in every envelope, even taking apart the bottom of a medicine box. My mother tried to stand up to call for help. Hannah grabbed her by the shoulders. "Stay put. If you call Hank, this whole family will be ruined," she replied. "It will be ruined because of what you've done, not because I'm telling the truth." As she said this, her lips began to tremble. Leo yelled that he had worked like a dog for years and was still treated like an employee. He said I had my name on everything, while he had nothing. Hannah said, "Just give us the notebook, and we can still handle this as a family." My mother refused to speak. She felt a heaviness in her chest, and her left arm started to go numb. As she tried to get to the door, her legs gave out and she collapsed. Laura squeezed her hand. "Did Leo call for an ambulance right away, Mom?" My mother closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. "No." Leo and Hannah helped her back to the bed and continued to search for the notebook. One searched the room, the other ran down to the warehouse. They even took her keys and tried every lock in the accounting office. Nearly an hour passed. It was only when my mother could no longer sit up on her own and her mouth was visibly drooping that Leo panicked and called for an ambulance. My voice was hoarse as I asked, "In that hour, could you call out?" Susan looked at me, her right hand scratching weakly at the bedsheet. "Heard everything. Didn't help." I stood up and walked out into the hallway. I didn't punch the wall, throw a chair, or scream Leo's name. Sometimes, when anger is that immense, it's silent. It just makes you cold, right down to your bones. Laura followed me out. "Hank." I sat down on the chair by the window. If they had called for help right away, she might not be in this condition. Laura didn't offer any false reassurances. No one knows how different it would have been. But they chose to look for the notebook before they chose to save your mother. That alone tells you what they were afraid of. I looked through the glass. My mother was lying still, a nurse retaking her blood pressure. All this time, I had thought Leo and Hannah's deception was about money. It was only then that I understood. My mother wasn't a burden they wanted to get rid of. She was the witness who had seen every stolen dollar, every fake delivery, and every lie they had built. As long as she was alive and could remember, the blue notebook could still surface. And for Leo and Hannah, the most terrifying thing wasn't a sick mother, but a witness who had not yet been silenced. 3 days later, my mother was moved to a regular room. She could sit up for longer periods, but whenever she spoke too much, the corner of her mouth would twitch. Dr. Evans warned us not to let her get too emotional. That morning, Leo showed up. He was wearing a white dress shirt I had bought him for his birthday, carrying a container of bird's nest soup and a bag of fruit. Hannah followed behind him, her eyes red and swollen, holding a box of nutritional supplements for seniors. As soon as he entered the room, Leo put the things down and knelt by my mother's bed. "Mom, I was wrong." Susan looked at him, her right hand on the blanket clenching slightly. Leo lowered his head, tears falling onto the tiled floor. "I just borrowed some money from the company to invest. I thought I could pay it back in a few months, but I just got in deeper. Please forgive me this one time, Mom." Hannah stood behind him, also in tears. "Hank, we know we were wrong. Let's just handle this as a family. Don't let it go any further." I pulled up a chair and sat across from them. "You said you borrowed it. Where is the money now?" Leo looked up. "I invested with a friend, but he ran off with the money. I'm trying to get it back. What's his name?" He was silent. "How much money?" "I haven't added it all up yet." I looked him straight in the eye. "You don't remember how much you took, but you remember very clearly that you need to ask me to stop the audit." Leo bit his lip and turned away. Hannah opened a briefcase and took out a stack of typed papers. "We're not trying to run away from this. This is our plan to fix it." The first page was titled Repayment Agreement. In it, Leo and Hannah took responsibility for a sum of $42,000, promising to pay it back over 2 years in quarterly installments. At the bottom was a condition. I had to agree to stop the audit of all past transactions, not request any records from suppliers or distributors, and consider all disputes resolved internally. I read that far and burst out laughing. Leo looked at me. "What's so funny?" "I'm just thinking what a bargain you're trying to get. $42,000 to buy silence for all the years before that. Is that the amount you've identified? Or is it the amount you think I can swallow?" Hannah interjected. "Don't talk about us like we're criminals. We've put our blood and sweat into this company too. For years, Leo has worked late nights, run the warehouse, made deliveries. He may have made a mistake, but it was because he was trying to do business." I placed the agreement on the table. What kind of business leaves distributors who have paid in full marked as debtors? What kind of business buys back old components with new serial numbers? What kind of business lets their mother lie in a rented room while her medical funds flow into your bank account? Leo froze. I continued. "I transferred $22,500 over 5 months. Mom was at Serenity Springs for 3 days. Where did the rest of it go?" Hannah said quietly. "We were having financial difficulties. We had a loan due. We thought we'd just use it temporarily and pay it back. That was Mom's medical money. We were still taking care of her. We didn't abandon her." From the bed, Susan let out a sharp breath. Laura quickly went to her side, but my mother shook her head, her eyes fixed on Leo. She spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "If you just borrowed money, why did you leave me at the hospital?" Leo's face went pale. "You're misremembering, Mom. I went home to get your things. When I got back, Laura had already taken you." Susan clutched the edge of the blanket. "You didn't come back. Mom, you've had a stroke. Your memory is not reliable. Don't listen to outsiders." Laura stood up straight. "Leo, I haven't said a word. Don't use me as an excuse to deny what your mother is saying." Hannah turned to her. "Laura, this is our family's business," Laura replied calmly. "I may not be family anymore, but I was the one the hospital called when no one from your family came back." Hannah's face flushed, but she couldn't argue. Leo stood up, dusted off his knees, and looked at me. "What do you want, Hank? Are you not happy until I've lost everything? I want the whole truth. I've admitted I was wrong, and I'm willing to pay the money back. You've only admitted to the part you want to admit to." Leo slammed his hand on the table. "You always talk about principles because your name is on the company. You have the house, the car, the power. I've worked like an ox for years, and in the end, I'm still just the warehouse manager on a salary." I looked at him for a long time. "I may have overlooked your contributions. If you felt the compensation was unfair, you could have said something. You could have quit. You could have started your own company. No one forced you to steal from clients, create fake invoices, and abandon our mother at a hospital and call it hard work." Leo gritted his teeth. "You make it sound so easy. Taking our mother's medical money, that's what you found easy." The room was silent. Hannah pulled at her husband's arm, her voice softening. "Hank, we have our own lives to worry about. If you don't care about us, at least think about the family ties. Blood is thicker than water." I looked at her. "It's because of that blood that I trusted you for so long, but being blood doesn't give you a free pass." I picked up the agreement. Leo's tone immediately softened. "Sign it, Hank. I promise I'll never touch another dollar. Give me 2 years, and I'll pay back the $42,000. I pointed to the last clause. "Why do I have to promise not to look at past transactions? Is it to stabilize the company, or is it to keep something bigger from being uncovered?" He didn't answer. I tore the paper in half, then tore it again, until the conditions lay in 4 pieces on the table. Hannah burst into tears. "You're pushing us to a dead end," I said. "The truth hurts. The more our family tries to hide it, the deeper the rot will spread. 3 years ago, everyone gave you a second chance. You used that chance to go even further." Leo was no longer kneeling. He stood up, his face devoid of its earlier pleading. His eyes were cold, as if the man who had been crying at his mother's bedside was someone else entirely. "If you're going to be this heartless, then don't blame me." I stood up. "Don't get it twisted. You were the one who cut the family ties first." Leo looked at his mother. Susan had turned to face the window, not calling him back. Hannah gathered the torn pieces of paper and pulled her husband out of the room. Before leaving, she looked back at Laura, then at the file in my hands. Her expression was that of someone calculating what needed to be disposed of before the house was searched. I stepped out into the hallway, but the elevator doors had just closed. Laura was standing beside me. "They're not going to just sit around and wait for you to finish your audit." I watched the floor numbers descend. "I know." In the room, my mother called out weakly, "Hank." I went back in. She grabbed my wrist, trying to say, "Don't. Let them. Take me." I leaned down to reassure her, but a cold premonition was already forming in my gut. The agreement wasn't a confession. It was Leo's last-ditch effort to buy time. When I tore it up, I also forced him to understand that to keep his secrets, he could no longer just cry, kneel, or appeal to brotherly love. 3 days later, Dr. Evans approved my mother's discharge. She still couldn't walk on her own. I wanted to take her to my house immediately, hire a caregiver, and install grab bars in the bathroom. Laura disagreed. "Your house is almost 10 miles from her physical therapy center. The long car ride will tire her out. The apartment may be small, but it's close to the hospital, and Mrs. Gable is used to helping her. Let's wait at least another week." I looked at my mother, and she nodded slightly, her right hand still clutching the hem of Laura's shirt. I had to agree. I hired an additional daytime caregiver, changed the locks, and told Mrs. Gable to call me immediately if Leo or Hannah showed up. I placed a simple push-button phone by her bed, with my number programmed on the first key. Before I left, my mother pulled my hand. "Don't be gone long. I'm just going to the office for a few hours. I'll be back this afternoon." She looked toward the door, her anxiety palpable. I assured her that this time, no one could take her away without her consent. But people with bad intentions rarely knock. They enter with a single sentence designed to incite panic. That morning, the independent auditors were scheduled to meet me at the warehouse to cross-reference the data. Laura stayed with my mother until almost noon, then went out to the market to buy medicine and fish soup. About 10 minutes after she left, Mrs. Gable's phone rang. It was Hannah. "Mrs. Gable? Hank was just in an accident on the expressway. He's being taken to the state hospital. The doctors say his mother needs to be there because he keeps calling for her." Mrs. Gable was frantic. "Is it serious?" "I don't know yet. Leo is on his way to pick up Mom. Can you help get her ready?" Hannah knew exactly how to exploit our greatest fear. My mother had just had a stroke, but the moment she heard I was in trouble, she wouldn't be able to stay put. Less than 15 minutes later, Quinn's silver van pulled up to the end of the alley. Leo got out first. He was carrying a folded wheelchair, a bag of medication, and my mother's old medical records. With him was another man in a baseball cap, one of Quinn's employees. Leo ran into the room, out of breath. "Mom, Hank was in an accident. I'm taking you to the hospital." My mother's face went white, and she tried to push herself up. "What about?" "Hank? He was hit by a truck. The doctors are operating. We have to go now." Mrs. Gable held onto the wheelchair. "Let me try calling Hank again." Leo stopped her. His phone was smashed. "You won't get through. There's no time to wait for Laura." My mother refused to get in the wheelchair. She grabbed the bed frame, shaking her head, and repeatedly called my name. Leo leaned in. "You're confused, Mom. Hank told me to come get you." She looked him straight in the eye. "No. Go." The other man came in. Leo said to Mrs. Gable, "She gets confused after the stroke. Sometimes she even thinks I'm a burglar. Can you give me a hand? If she gets agitated, it could be dangerous." Mrs. Gable was still hesitant. "Give me the hospital address." State hospital, emergency room. We're wasting time. While Leo and the other man were lifting my mother into the wheelchair, Mrs. Gable stepped back toward the door, hid her phone behind a plastic basket, and took several photos. She managed to get a clear shot of Leo's face and the van's license plate. My mother tried to cling to the doorframe. Her voice was weak, and she could only make garbled sounds. Leo pried her fingers off one by one, still cooing, "I'm taking you to see Hank, Mom. Don't make people misunderstand." The van pulled away from the alley just as Laura was at a soup stand 2 blocks away. Nearly an hour later, I left the warehouse. My phone showed 6 missed calls from Laura and 3 from Mrs. Gable. I called back immediately. Laura practically screamed into the phone. "Where are you?" "At the office. What's wrong?" There was a brief silence, then her voice trembled. "They lied. Leo took your mother." I raced to my car. When I got to the apartment, the door was wide open. The bed was empty, the blanket thrown aside. My mother's slippers were still under the bed. The bag of medicine she had just bought was on the table, still tied. The phone I had left by her pillow was on the floor. The battery popped out. Laura was standing in the middle of the room, her face ashen. I was only gone for half an hour. I picked up the phone. "It's not your fault." It was the first time I had said that to her without being driven by some momentary emotion. Mrs. Gable showed me the photos. I saw that he had the right medication, so I didn't dare fight him. But the old lady kept shaking her head. I had a bad feeling, so I took the pictures. I zoomed in on the license plate. It was Quinn's van. I called Leo. This time, he answered right away. "Where did you take Mom?" "I'm taking her home to be cared for. You don't need to know the address. Her medication is still here. You took her against her will." Leo laughed scornfully. "She's my mother too. You left her with your ex-wife, and now you're accusing me of taking her against her will? You don't have the sole right to our mother, Hank." "Leo, I'm asking you one last time. Where is she? I'll let you know when she's stable." He hung up. My first instinct was to jump in my car and search every place Leo might be. His house, the old warehouse, Quinn's place. I was going to drag him out. Laura grabbed my arm. "Where are you going?" "His house, the warehouse, Quinn's place. I'll find him." "And what if they're keeping her somewhere else? If you spook them, they'll just move her again. She doesn't have her medication. She can't handle being dragged around." I froze. Laura looked me straight in the eye. "This time, don't act out of anger. Report it to the authorities. Give them the hospital records, what my mother told you, the photo of the license plate, the recording of Leo refusing to give you the address, and the evidence of the forged documents." Mrs. Gable agreed to be a witness. She recounted the call from Hannah, the lie about the accident, and how my mother had resisted leaving. I saved the original photos and the call history. I also contacted the hospital to get a statement confirming that I had not been admitted that day. We went to file a report that same afternoon. While I was filling out paperwork, my mother was being pushed into a room in Quinn's vacant house in the next county. The window was boarded up. Her phone, blood pressure, medication, and ID were all taken from her. Hannah placed a recording phone and a pre-written script in front of her. "All you have to do is say that you voluntarily went with Leo, that Laura was holding you for money, and that you entrusted all your finances to us. After you say that, we'll take you back." My mother turned her head away. Leo pulled up a chair. His voice was cold. "Don't make this difficult, Mom. It's just a few sentences." She looked at the youngest son she had once kneeled to protect, and slowly, she shook her head. Outside, the engine of the silver van was still running. And back in the apartment at the end of the alley, my mother's slippers lay under the bed, the clearest evidence that she had been taken from a place she had no intention of leaving. Quinn had always thought he was just lending his name to a family member. He registered Northern Supply, signed a few documents, issued invoices from a list Hannah gave him, and took his percentage. Whenever anyone asked about a warehouse, he would just laugh and say the parts were shipped directly from the manufacturer. With all the stamped paperwork and bank transfers, it looked like a legitimate business. But that afternoon, when he walked into his own vacant house in the next county, Quinn realized that Leo and Hannah had dragged him into something far more serious. Susan Miller was sitting on a wooden chair in the middle of the room, her back against the wall. One of her legs was awkwardly positioned, her right hand trembling. On the table was a recording phone, some blank papers, and a red ink pad for thumbprints. Hannah held up a piece of paper and read slowly. "Just say this, Mom. I voluntarily came with my son, Leo Miller. Laura Johnson was holding me in a rented room to demand money from my family. I have agreed to let my son Leo and his wife manage all of my medical funds." Susan turned her head away. Hannah lowered her voice. "Just say these few sentences. When it's over, we'll take you to a nice place with a proper caregiver." She looked at her mother-in-law, her lips trembling. "No, lies." Leo stood by the window, his arms crossed. Don't be stubborn, Mom. Your speech is slurred anyway. They'll only catch a word here and there. We'll handle the rest. Quinn closed the door and asked quietly, "What did you call me here for?" "I thought you just needed a place to rest for a bit." Leo pulled him into a corner of the kitchen. "Just stay here and watch the door. My mom's confused. We're afraid she'll wander off and fall." Quinn peeked through a crack in the door. Confused, but she knows enough to refuse to lie? Leo's expression soured. "Quinn, this is my family's business. Stay out of it." "Then what's the ink pad for on the table?" Hannah came out of the room. "There are some treatment forms that Mom needs to sign with her thumbprint. Her hand is too weak to write." Quinn wasn't a saint. If he were, he wouldn't have lent his business registration, signed fake invoices, or driven his van with a few empty boxes to the Hometown Essentials warehouse late at night. But seeing the frail old woman surrounded by 3 able-bodied people, he began to realize this was about more than just a few padded invoices. Hannah went back into the room and moved the phone closer. "Say it, Mom." "Hank believes an outsider now. He wants to put his own brother in jail. If you love Leo, you have to save him." Susan's breathing grew heavy. Love is not covering up wrongs. Leo gritted his teeth and pulled a chair closer. "Have you forgotten who's been taking care of you all these years?" She looked him straight in the eye. "You left me." The words were few, but they hung in the room like a sheet of ice. Leo grabbed his mother's wrist. "Who told you that? Was it Laura?" Susan tried to pull her hand back, her body leaning to one side. Quinn stepped in and steadied the chair. "Let go of her. If she falls, no one can handle that." Leo released her but pointed a finger at Quinn. "Get out." Quinn retreated to the kitchen. Through the thin wall, he could hear everything. Hannah said, "If we can't get the video, let's just get the thumbprint first. We can fill in the text later." Leo replied, "Be careful. The last document was rejected by the rehab center. This time, we're not using the center's name. It will say she voluntarily gave us power of attorney and confirmed that Laura was holding her hostage." Quinn stood frozen. All this time, Leo and Hannah had told him that all the documents related to Susan had the family's consent. Now he was hearing with his own ears how they planned to get a thumbprint first and add the text later. The phone in Quinn's pocket vibrated. It was the auto shop, telling him the fuel pump on his van was bad and it needed to be towed. Quinn hung up and looked out at the yard. The van was still there, tilted slightly because of a low front tire. He then heard Hannah whisper, "If the police ask about the Northern Supply invoices, we'll just blame it all on Quinn. The company is in his name, the bank account too." Leo replied, "Right. We just placed the orders. We didn't know if he delivered short or forged the documents." Hannah laughed. "He was greedy for the percentage. He should take the fall. We're not all going down together." The blood rushed to Quinn's face. He had expected them to deny everything, but he never thought they would be planning to throw him under the bus right in his own house. Quinn quietly took out his burner phone, started a recording, and placed it behind an aluminum pot on a shelf. In the room, Hannah continued, "And the notebook is definitely somewhere in that van. She keeps looking out at the yard." Leo said, "Tonight, we'll strip all the panels. When we find it, we burn it." Quinn shuddered. He remembered seeing Susan walking around his van a few months ago at dusk. At the time, he thought she had just dropped something. A violent cough erupted from the room. Quinn ran in. Susan was bent over, her lips blue, her hand clutching the edge of the table. Hannah was still holding the phone, recording, while Leo was trying to pull his mother upright. "Don't let her lie down. We're not done filming." Quinn pushed his hand away. "She can't breathe. Where's her medicine?" Hannah pointed to the outer room. "In that bag." Quinn opened the bag and saw all sorts of medication. But he didn't know which one she needed. "Take her to a hospital." Leo blocked the door. "No. If we take her now, everything will be exposed. If something happens to her, how are you going to hide it?" Leo got in Quinn's face. "You're already in this deep. Don't pretend you're clean." That sentence snapped Quinn to his senses. It was true, he was in deep. But if he stood by and did nothing, he wouldn't just be the guy who signed fake invoices. He would be an accomplice to a crime, watching a sick old woman in distress while he helped lock the door. Quinn went back to the kitchen and grabbed his burner phone. The recording was over 10 minutes long. He pinned the location of the house on a map and sent it to my number. Along with the location, he sent the audio file and a secretly taken photo of Susan being held in the room. The message had only one sentence. "Hank, your mom is here. Come with the police. Don't come alone." After sending the message, Quinn removed the SIM card and put the phone in his pocket. He was planning to make an excuse about going out to buy medicine and then disappear, but when he turned the key in the ignition, the engine just sputtered twice and died. Quinn tried again. Nothing. Leo came down from the porch. "What's wrong with the van?" "Probably the fuel pump." Leo looked at him suspiciously. "Where are you going?" "To buy medicine for your mother. Or do you want her to die here?" Leo didn't answer. He stood in front of the van, his eyes fixed on Quinn. From inside, Hannah called out, "Leo, she still won't give us her thumbprint." Quinn clenched the keys in his palm. The broken-down van had trapped him here with the very people who were trying to set him up. But because it couldn't leave the yard, the secret hidden behind its metal panel was still safe. And the message Quinn had just sent had opened the only way for us to find them. Quinn's message arrived while I was still at the station, the ink on my statement barely dry. Seeing the photo of my mother huddled in that strange room, I shot to my feet, knocking my chair over. Laura grabbed the phone from my hand, looked at the location, and said, "Forward everything to the officer. Don't call Quinn back, and don't let Leo know that you know where they are." I forced myself to sit back down. If I went there myself, they might move my mother or put her in even more danger. The officers reviewed the recording, the photo, the call history, the medical records, and the evidence of Leo's refusal to provide an address. After a quick verification, local law enforcement was dispatched to the location. Laura and I were instructed to follow behind. The silver van was parked in the yard. The front door was locked. An officer called out, "Is anyone home? We need you to open the door for an inspection." We heard footsteps scurrying inside. A few seconds later, Leo opened the door a crack, his face pale. "What's going on, officers?" "We've received a report that an elderly person is being held here against her will. We need you to cooperate." Leo blocked the doorway. "No one is being held here. My mother came with me voluntarily. I saw my mother's wheelchair near the kitchen, but I didn't see her." "Leo, where's Mom?" He snapped. "You left her with your ex-wife." "What's wrong with me bringing her home?" The officer instructed Leo to step aside. Hannah ran out from inside, holding a bag of papers, saying that her mother-in-law was sleeping and didn't want to be disturbed. Just then, from a room at the back of the house, we heard 3 faint knocks. Laura called out, "Mom, it's Laura!" Immediately, a muffled sound came from inside. The door to the room was locked from the outside with a small padlock. When it was opened, my mother was sitting on the floor by the bed, her back against the wall. Her right hand was red from banging on the door. Her hair was matted to her forehead, her breathing short and ragged. Laura knelt down beside her. "Mom, are you hurt anywhere? Where's your medicine?" My mother pointed to the other room and shook her head. There was no phone or blood pressure medication in the room. The window was boarded up. Leo quickly said, "She locked herself in because she was afraid of strangers." An officer held up the padlock. The lock was on the outside. How did she lock it herself? Leo was speechless. Hannah immediately changed her story. Leo must have locked it by mistake. "I didn't know. I was in the other room getting things ready." When my mother saw Hannah, she began to tremble. She grabbed Laura's arm, trying to say, "Not voluntary." Leo stepped forward. "She's tired. She's not making any sense. Please don't misunderstand." My mother summoned all her strength, pointed to the door, and cried out, "Laura, save me." Those 3 words made all of Leo's explanations meaningless. Paramedics took my mother to an ambulance to be monitored. Laura went with her. I stayed behind to witness the scene being processed. On the living room table was a phone on a tripod, a half-finished video still on the screen. Hannah could be heard off camera, reading the script. Leo was repeatedly telling my mother to repeat after her. Beside it were 3 blank pieces of paper with red thumbprints at the bottom, an ink pad, and a handwritten draft. "I voluntarily give my son, Leo Miller, power of attorney over my finances. Laura Johnson held me against my will to demand money from my family. I recognized Hannah's handwriting. It was the same handwriting that had appeared on thousands of payment slips. Hannah started crying. I only wrote what Leo told me to. I was afraid of my husband, so I had to do it. Quinn, standing near the kitchen, his face gray, played the recording he had sent me. In it, Hannah's voice was clear. If we can't get the video, let's just get the thumbprint first. We can fill in the text later. The room fell silent. Hannah turned to her husband. You forced me. This was all your idea. Leo snarled. Shut up. You did all the paperwork. Don't try to blame it all on me now. They started attacking each other right in front of everyone. Quinn pointed to the van in the yard. The notebook she was hiding is probably in the van. I heard them say they were going to strip the panels tonight to find it. The van was searched with Quinn and the others present. The trunk, the spare tire, the toolbox, all empty. Leo stood nearby, his eyes darting toward the left side of the van. A technician removed the plastic panel from inside the cargo area. Behind a layer of dust and wires was a yellowed plastic bag, tied with a rotten rubber band. I recognized my mother's handwriting on the outer layer of paper, for Hank. Inside was the blue-covered school notebook. The edges were warped from moisture, but the pages were still legible. The notebook was documented, photographed, and properly preserved as evidence. I just stood by and watched as they turned each page. My mother had written in large letters, with some misspellings. There were dates, amounts, distributor names, and the last 4 digits of the license plate. Next to many entries were simple, everyday observations. Hannah took a black bag. Quinn's van came at night. Only 5 boxes. Mr. Look said he paid in full. New invoice has more items than the real delivery. It wasn't a professional ledger. But when cross-referenced with the 3 receipts, Thorne's original invoices, the software's edit history, and the transactions with Northern Supply, many of the entries lined up. The independent auditors later provided their preliminary report. The amount of money that appeared to have been embezzled through inflated inventory, unrecorded cash payments, and transactions with Northern Supply was approximately $248,000. This figure did not include the money I had sent for my mother's care. I didn't declare Leo or Hannah guilty of any crime. I had already paid a heavy price for my habit of judging based on incomplete information. The notebook was just a lead. Every signature and every transaction still had to be officially verified. When they were asked to come to the station, Leo turned to me, his eyes red. If you had shared the company with me fairly from the beginning, I wouldn't have had to do this. You have everything, and I'm just the guy in the background. I looked at the brother I had once trusted more than my own wife. I may have been wrong to undervalue your contributions, but no injustice forced you to steal from our clients, abandon our mother, and lock her in a room. Leo laughed bitterly. You make it sound so noble. I don't need to sound noble, I replied. I just need to state one simple fact. You valued this notebook more than our mother's life. He turned his back. Outside, Laura was helping my mother into the ambulance. Susan looked back at the house, then at the notebook being sealed in an evidence bag on the table. Her expression wasn't one of triumph, just of exhaustion, as if she had finally set down a burden she had carried for too long. I walked over and took my mother's cold hand. This time, she didn't need to say anything more. The things she had fought to preserve with her memory, with a simple school notebook, and through days of fear, had finally been brought into the light. 4 months after we found the blue notebook, I learned that a case doesn't just end because the wrongdoers have been taken into custody. My mother's notebook was just the beginning. Every receipt had to be cross-referenced, every account verified, every signature authenticated. Some of the money had been funneled through 2 different accounts before being withdrawn in cash on the same day. Some invoices claimed the delivery of 100 units, while the warehouse security footage showed only a few light boxes being unloaded. After the investigation, Leo and Hannah were identified as the main perpetrators in creating fraudulent records, embezzling company funds, withholding client payments, and coercing my mother to affix her thumbprint to documents she did not agree to. The acts of abandoning her at the hospital, administering unprescribed medication, taking her against her will, and slandering Laura were also brought to light. Quinn had provided the location and the recording, but that didn't absolve him. He was still held accountable for registering Northern Supply, signing off on the paperwork, taking a percentage, and using his van to legitimize non-existent deliveries. During our last encounter, Quinn looked at me. Hank, I saved your mother in the end. Can you put in a good word for me? I replied, you provided the evidence because you were afraid of taking the full blame. Your cooperation will be noted, but you still have to answer for your own actions. Quinn lowered his head. Greed sometimes starts with just signing a few papers for someone, and ends with spending a lifetime explaining why you looked the other way. A portion of their assets was seized to cover the damages. Hometown Essentials didn't go under, but the trust of our distributors and employees was shaken. I hired an independent accounting firm to overhaul our books, separating the authority for purchasing, receiving, and payment. No single person could create, approve, and alter records anymore. Warehouse camera footage was stored for longer periods. Cash payments had to be immediately logged into the system, and new suppliers had to be vetted in person. At a company-wide meeting, I stood before more than 40 employees. My biggest mistake wasn't just trusting my own brother. It was creating an environment where people were afraid to speak up when they saw something wrong, because they thought it wasn't their place to get involved in the owner's family business. From now on, anyone who spots an irregularity has the right to report it directly to the Independent Control Unit. I went to each distributor who had been wrongly accused of non-payment to apologize, correct their accounts, and offer reasonable compensation for the disruption. Mr. Look held the new statement and sighed. You can make money back. It's the damage to your reputation that's hard to swallow. I understood, because Laura had been forced to swallow a much bigger injustice for nearly 3 years. I called a family meeting. I showed them the uncropped photo, the hospital records, and the results of the investigation. I made it clear that Laura had never had an affair with Marcus Thorne, had not held my mother hostage, had not demanded any money, and had not taken a single dollar from our family. The aunt who had been filming at the apartment mumbled, I just heard what Hannah said and got angry. I replied, listening to one side of the story and then publicly shaming someone isn't just getting angry. It's being irresponsible with your words. I didn't ask for any apologies. I only demanded that those who had posted the video and the accusations issue a retraction in the same places where they had spread the lies. I calculated the approximately $3,800 Laura had spent on rent, medicine, and physical therapy for my mother, and transferred it to her. She saw the notification from the bank. You sent more than what my receipts show. The difference is for the days you had to miss work to care for her. I don't need to be paid for that. This isn't money to buy your forgiveness. She's my mother. Her expenses are my responsibility. This time, she didn't send it back. My mother came to live with me. She had physical therapy every morning, ate a low-sodium diet, and was able to speak in short sentences. One afternoon, she asked me to invite Laura over. When Laura walked in, my mother pushed herself up, her eyes welling with tears. Laura, I'm sorry. Laura pulled a chair closer. Don't get emotional, Mom. I knelt and begged you to cover for Leo. And then I listened to him and kicked you out of the house. I thought that by protecting one son, I was keeping the family together. Instead, I drove away the most decent person I knew. Laura took her frail hand. I took care of you because I felt a sense of duty, not to make you feel indebted to me. My mother choked back a sob. Years ago, when you had your surgery, I stayed up with you. You remembered that kindness and you saved me. But I, because of my misguided love, destroyed your home. Laura replied. I repaid a kindness, but repaying a kindness doesn't mean I have to go back to being your daughter-in-law. My mother nodded, not asking for anything more. She had learned that family ties are not a rope to bind others to a life of sacrifice. That evening, I walked Laura to the gate. Laura, I want to ask for a chance. She was quiet for a long time. A chance for what? Not to get back together right away. Just a chance to prove that I've changed. Laura looked at me. You can change to live a better life, Hank, but don't change just to get me back. I can forgive you to unburden my own heart, but being your wife again is a different story. The time I needed my husband to trust me the most, you were the first one to condemn me. I didn't kneel, I didn't grab her hand, and I didn't ask my mother to intervene. I just said, I understand. Correcting my mistakes is my responsibility. It's not a gift to be exchanged for the woman I once hurt so deeply. The next morning, I was back at the entrance of County General Hospital, serving meals. At that very same spot, Laura appeared in a simple blouse. Behind her was a food truck with 200 portions of hot oatmeal and breakfast burritos from the small catering business she had just opened. She set down a container. The last time I was here, I asked for 2 meals. Today, I'm giving back 200. I handed her a pair of gloves. And what about us? Laura looked at the line of people waiting, a faint smile on her lips. Let's let time answer that. For now, let's get this oatmeal out before it gets cold. I laughed. For the first time in a very long time, the sound of our laughter wasn't tinged with bitterness. Some debts can be repaid. A financial debt can be settled with money, but the debt of trust and honor can only be repaid by living a decent life, one day at a time.